of opening statements of 3 minutes each, followed by 11 questions with 2 minutes for each candidate, and then closing statements of 2 minutes each. Some of the questions were compiled in advance by the organizers. Others will come from the audience via the Q&A feature. The debate will last 1 hour. Council President Gómez and Ms. Jacobs, as you speak, please watch Jody, who will let you know you have 30 seconds left with an orange paddle, and red paddle will indicate that there's no time left. The candidates will alternate as we go through so that each has a chance to begin a question at a different time in the sequence. We hope to keep this informal and conversational, so feel free to interject a quick comment while still allowing your opponent to answer the question. In other words, let's keep this not like Tuesday night, if people remember that. It's great to see so many voters here today. Well, I can't see you, but I know that we have over 150 who are signed up for this debate. But please keep in mind there's no audience participation. Everyone will remain muted, but we do have a few ways for you to be involved. At the bottom of your screen, you can use the Q&A button to submit questions to me to be used depending upon how much time we have as the debate goes on. You can also use, and this should be the most fun, you can use the chat button to participate in the public chat with other audience members. If the chat becomes disruptive, we may need to turn it off, but we don't think this will happen. We think this will be a respectful and interactive way to engage using this new technology. Now, let's begin with opening statements, and we'll start in alphabetical order with City Council President Gómez's opening statement. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chris. Hi, everyone. I'm Georgette Gómez, and I'm the first LGBTQ Latina serving as president of the San Diego City Council, and I'm running for Congress in the 53rd Congressional District to stand up to Trump's dangerous agenda, but more importantly, to put the needs of working people in our community first and continue delivering results for San Diego families. I want to acknowledge the news that has broken over the last 2 days. Trump, the First Lady, White House staff, journalists, and other elected officials have tested positive for coronavirus. They've joined the nearly 50,000 people in San Diego County who have tested positive for COVID-19. This underscores how serious this virus continues to be, why we need elected leaders with experience who have taken this virus seriously, and why we must all continue to be precautious and keep each other healthy. This week, the House Democrats passed an updated version of the HEROES Act, which includes a second round of direct payments, funding for unemployment benefits, childcare, nutrition assistance, and so much more. I strongly hope that the Senate Republicans realize how dire it is to pass this package, especially now. As we face an economic and public health crisis that is being made worse by climate change, and it's hurting our most vulnerable communities, I will put people first. Earlier on during this crisis, I listened to experts and took immediate action to help working families in San Diego. Now, as we suffer through economic recession, recovery will require bold new investments in people. As your congressional woman, I plan to be a strong advocate for greater investment in public health, for bold proposals to fight the climate crisis, and for action to help suffering families and our small businesses that are our foundation of our economy. And I have experience that is needed in Washington. I have delivered results for San Diegan families. As president of the San Diego City Council, I work to expand affordable housing, strengthen protections for low-income renters. I led the implementation of our city's climate action plan, and they have delivered millions of new funding for community priorities, including street repairs, parks, libraries. I will bring this type of effective leadership to Congress as we fight for our democratic priorities, including action on climate change, the Green New Deal, universal health care, criminal justice reform, equal pay, gun violence prevention, and economic opportunity for all. Thank you, and I look forward to the questions tonight.
Thank you. And now, Ms. Jacobs, your opening statement.
Well, hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you to all of the Indivisible groups for hosting and Chris for moderating. I know I've met many of you over the course of this campaign, but for those of you I haven't met yet, my name is Sara Jacobs. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a third-generation San Diegan, born and raised, and went to local public schools. And I was really proud to serve my country at the State Department during the Obama administration, where I worked on preventing and responding to conflict around the world. At UNICEF in their innovation unit, where I created the organization's first big data strategy and worked to figure out how we could better use technology to serve vulnerable children around the world and respond to humanitarian emergencies. As the CEO of Project Connect, an international education nonprofit that was working to connect schools around the world to the internet, and now to serve my community for the last 2 years as the founder and chair of San Diego for Every Child, which is a countywide initiative to address childhood poverty here in San Diego County. As soon as we saw that COVID was hitting and that it was likely that schools would be closing, we immediately sprung into action, and we, along with our partners, built a coalition that helped mobilize over $55 million for childcare for essential workers and equitable distance learning. The next Congress may very well decide whether or not we expand the Supreme Court, how well and how equitably we recover from COVID-19, what policies we finally put in place to address racial justice. And as all of this is happening, we're losing 20 years of Susan Davis's seniority, which is why I believe it's so important for our region to elect someone who has the kind of experience that I have, making and implementing public policy at the federal level, who has the kind of experience that I have, building coalitions of diverse partners that work to find solutions to actual problems. My focus in Congress will be making sure that as we're doing that COVID response, that federal recovery dollars gets to those who need it most, to families, to workers, to small businesses. And that while we're making those incredibly important decisions, we're not losing sight of our other priorities, like climate change and the high cost of living for families here in San Diego. Because the fact of the matter is, the decisions that we make over the next few months will have enormous consequences for our future and the state of our economy. And I can promise you this, I have thought deeply about these issues. I was working on federal public policy long before I ever thought I would run for Congress. I'm ready to hit the ground running on day one. So thank you again for having us here today. I'm really looking forward to spending the next hour talking policy and what we need to do to recover from this crisis, and looking forward to all of your questions.
Thank you both for those introductory statements. Now let's go to the first question. You're both Democrats. What makes you better qualified to represent the 53rd district than your opponent? And we'll switch the order here, and we'll start with Ms. Jacobs.
Yeah, I think that my experience working in the federal government and working on federal public policy, working directly with members of Congress on appropriations to rebalance our foreign policy, on creating legislation that would better prevent and respond to pandemic threats, which, boy, do I wish had passed, or else we wouldn't be in the situation that we're in, on how to respond to economic crisis is incredibly important. And I also believe that we need a new generation of leaders who will do things differently, who will go to Congress and think about old problems from a new lens, will think about new problems that we're not addressing, or problems that we're not addressing with enough urgency, and who will not only think about policy differently, but will do things differently. We'll find ways to work across the aisle to actually get things done. And you know, our whole campaign has been about building coalitions, because I know that that is the only way to get things done anywhere, but especially in Washington. And we feel incredibly strongly that our campaign is about listening to everybody and respecting everybody and finding ways to work together to make San Diego better. And that's what I intend to do as a member of Congress.
Thank you. And City Council President Gomez, what makes you
Yes.
The best qualified?
Thank you, Chris. You know, I've dedicated my entire life in fighting for a country that is that it truly is reflective, but more importantly, a country that is responding to the needs of all our communities. As a first-generation Mexican American, a daughter of immigrant parents that grew up pretty poor in the South Bay, I have spent my entire life in San Diego region really fighting for our communities as a community organizer, fighting polluters to ensure that they're not harming our communities, children's health, the future of the existence of certain communities. Now as a council member and as the council president, I've been pushing strong progressive agendas that are truly addressing the issues that our communities are facing, such as the housing crisis, such as advancing implementation of the climate action plan. I've known now as a community organizer, as a public advocate, and now as a policymaker, what are some of the gaps that we are facing at the local level and all of the roads that in order for us to address these major crises, such as the housing crisis, the climate crisis, all of them lead to DC. And this is why I'm running to ensure that we're bringing our communities that have been needing a strong leader to really reflect in DC the needs of our communities. And that's what I bring to this race. Somebody that is a San Diego native that has dedicated her entire life in truly fighting for justice and inclusion. And this is what this country needs. And right now, I've had not only an opportunity to represent my community as a council member, but I have also been successful in building the relationships with Republicans to assist me in actually getting elected unanimously as a council member to lead the council. And this is the type of leadership that I will bring to DC.
Thank you. And you'll start the next question. Prior to the pandemic, many in California saw affordable housing as the biggest issue facing the state. What will you do in Congress to make housing more affordable? And so, Council President Gómez, you'll start this one.
Thank you for that critical question. Definitely, housing is a major issue, especially California being so expensive, and we're seeing the ripple effect of that. And that's why I've dedicated a major of my focus as a council member, really pushing and adopting and implementing new policies that will lead to developing more housing. I've been successful in dedicating some city land to develop affordable housing. I've been working on protecting our renters, but making it illegal to discriminate on the basis of how they're going to pay their rent. Actually influencing state policy that became illegal to discriminate on the basis of how people rent because they're going to pay with assistance from the government, meaning Section 8. This is the type of leadership that I will continue to push forward. I'm going to go to DC to ensure that California, that San Diego especially, our region, is getting its fair share. We're not. Currently, right now, under Section 8 for the city of San Diego, we have over 10 years of a waiting list for folks to get vouchers. We need to ensure that there's more vouchers available, but also ensure that those vouchers are reflected of what the need is for those that have it to ensure that they're paying their rent. We need to, utilize public land. I'm a huge supporter of making sure that there's public-private partnerships and making sure that we are dedicating that land for housing development. And we need to make sure that HUD is also getting more resources to ensure that we're getting more resources at the local region. And then the other piece, Chris, is getting more assistance to house our veterans as they come back and they're needing their support. It is really unfortunate that we haven't had an opportunity to build more housing with supportive services to ensure that they have the not only shelter, but also the support to ensure that they're transitioning into society in a healthier manner.
Thank you. Just a little slow unmuting there on my part. Now, Ms. Jacobs, your response to the housing issue.
Yeah, Chris, I'm really glad that this is one of the first questions you asked, because you'll probably be unsurprised to know that this is one of the #1 things I hear from anyone that I talk to. And, you know, my aunt and uncle are postal workers. They've worked for the post office for 30 years, and they were able to buy a house in Normal Heights on their post office salary. And, you know, we need to make sure that future generations have those same kinds of opportunities, which is why I've worked with community members to create a plan on how we can make sure that any stimulus package that we pass in Congress addresses our housing crisis. And I think there are 3 key components to that. So the first is the emergency assistance that we need right now. We need $100 billion in emergency rental assistance, $75 billion in emergency homeowners assistance, and 750,000 emergency housing vouchers just right now. But then as we look forward at what we need to do to address our crisis more broadly, we need to fix our housing safety net. I think we should make housing vouchers a universal program. I was really glad to see Vice President Biden put that as part of his platform. But in addition to making sure that housing vouchers are a universal program, I think we need to expand the small area fair market rents so that the housing vouchers actually enable people to find housing here in San Diego. I also support a refundable rental housing tax credit so that no family pays more than 30% of their income on rent. And lastly, we know we need to build more housing, including by leveraging public dollars for private investment, by funding a housing trust fund, a capital magnet fund, fixing the low-income housing tax credit that was gutted in the 2017 Republican tax bill. And what I'm proposing is a modern works public administration that will employ out-of-work Americans to help make sure we're building the kind of housing that's affordable to San Diegans.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The next question will go to start with Council President Gómez. Police shootings and the associated, actually this should go, you should start with this. I'm getting out of order here. Police shootings and the associated protests have caused many to worry about the extent of racism in America. What will you do in Congress to promote racial equality, and how do you see the role of police changing? So if you'll start with that, Ms. Jacobs.
Yeah, I have to say that I have been so proud of all of the, in particular, young people who have taken to the streets and make sure that this issue does not leave the headlines, and not letting our leaders settle for the way things have always been done. And working with these young leaders, I've put together a series of town halls with our campaign, talking about issues like the school to prison pipeline, like how to organize your own community and how to stay involved after you protest. And why I worked with leaders in San Diego's Black community to create a plan on how we can make sure that we're prioritizing racial justice at the federal level. While much of the decisions around funding for police and law enforcement happens at the local level, there's a lot we can do from Congress to set national standards on use of force and training, make it easier to hold bad police accountable, but also to recognize that policing happens within the broader context of racial injustice. And so I support a truth and reconciliation process because in my experience working in post-conflict countries, you can never really move forward if you don't address and reckon with your past, which the United States has not yet done. It's why I support H.R. 40, a commission to study reparations, and why I think we need to do a lot more to address the racial wealth gap. You know, when my great-grandparents first moved to San Diego, they lived in College area because it's one of the few places that Jewish families were allowed to live. But we need to do so much more to address this kind of redlining, including by specific HUD programming for down payments and no interest loans, and to make sure that we are investing in programs like baby bonds that Senator Booker has introduced that would let any child born in the United States have a savings account that they could spend on housing, on starting a business, on paying for education upon turning 18. That will do a lot to close the racial wealth gap.
Thank you. And City Council President Gómez.
Chris, can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, the police shootings and the associated protests have caused many to worry about racism in America. What will you do in Congress to promote racial equality, and how do you see the role of police changing?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. You know, currently as a member of the city council, we've been pushing been working very closely with Council Member Monica Montgomery and pushing some strong reforms and in reaction to what's been happening. But I want to start by recognizing the importance that, you know, racial profiling hasn't occurred this year. It's going on for the history of this country. So it's really critical that we need to acknowledge that as a country. And because of it, we need to recognize the role that the federal government really has played and feeding this racial profiling, and not only recognize it, but then also ensure that there's historical recognition. Aside from the historical recognition, we also need to ensure that we're putting resources into the communities that are asking for investment, the underserved communities that instead of getting those investments, they're getting profile, they're getting police. This is why I've been doing the work that I've been doing my entire life as an organizer, making sure that underserved communities get the recognition at any level of government to ensure that we are lifting our communities, that we are investing. But in relation to police and racial profiling, we need to ensure that we're setting a national standard of use of force. We need to demilitarize the police, ban the selling of military weapons to police departments. And I'm gonna work hard to ensure that we're getting to the finish line and sign into law the George Floyd Justice and Policy Act, which would truly create a ripple effect in how PD is accountable by banning the chokehold nationwide, by making sure that we're truly creating a de-escalation training that is reflective of the community and making sure that folks are not misusing the police force.
Thank you. And that's actually a segue into one of the questions from the audience that came in through the chat or through the Q&A function. And the question is, income and wealth inequality is one of the most profound challenges of our time, contributing to rises in poverty, prejudice, violence, diseases, and so on. What policies will you propose to bolster to help address this pressing issue? And if Council President Gomez, if you'll start.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. I would say, I mean, the premise of racial profiling, of racial injustices that this country has created, not investing in communities that have been redlined for historically. This is what this fight is about. Right now, acknowledging that the climate crisis is very real, but also more importantly, recognizing who gets impacted the most if we don't move in a fair manner to address this issue are once again communities of color. We're seeing the impacts of COVID, once again impacting communities of color. So you start layering all of these different issues that our communities have been facing. So what do? We need to start by undoing the Trump's tax cut that really was created when the premise that it was supposed to help everybody, but that's not the reality. The reality is that it's only helping the rich, the folks that continue to get benefited by oppressing people, and the corporations that continue to oppress and mismanage and abuse the workers. We're seeing it right now under COVID. We are seeing the corporations getting wealthier by the minute. That type of system has not worked. The trickle-down economics have not worked. And we need to truly create a system that will uplift and be invested in the communities and truly not allow the wealthy to continue manipulating policies in DC that will only benefit at the end of the day themselves.
Thank you. And Ms. Jacobs, how would you address income inequality?
Yeah, look, I started San Diego for Every Child because I recognized that childhood poverty in San Diego was a huge issue before the economic crisis that we're currently in. about 40% of San Diego's kids lived in families who were experiencing poverty. And in a county, in a state as wealthy as San Diego and California, I thought that was simply unacceptable. And while there was a lot of good work being done, it was clear that we needed to do more to really address that problem. And we know that during COVID, that has only gotten worse. So from Congress, I think there's a few things we need to do. So the first is that we need to make our tax code fairer and more progressive, starting by repealing the harmful provisions in the Republican tax bill from 2017 that I've never supported. We need to close loopholes. We need to make sure that corporations are paying their fair share. We need to make the highest marginal tax rate higher and make sure capital gains are the same as the highest marginal tax rate. And we need to close loopholes that enable people who are just moving money around to skirt the tax code so that we're not benefiting passive capital accumulation more than we're benefiting hard work and labor. We also know that there's a racial component to this, and I talked a little bit about the racial wealth gap in my last answer, but I think we need really targeted specific programs from the Department of Housing and Urban Development for communities who have historically been redlined, including grants for down payment assistance, low and no interest loans, making sure that we are putting in place programs that enable renting to owning for communities that don't believe in taking interest for their religious tradition, and the baby bond program. And then we also know that kids and seniors are the most affected by income inequality and poverty. And so I'm really excited by some of the proposals in Congress to expand the child tax credit, expand the earned income tax credit and the refundability so that all families in San Diego and in the country are getting the assistance they need through the tax code.
Thank you. And let's move from that audience question to one of the ones that was submitted earlier. And that is on the on healthcare. Do you support expansion of Obamacare? Do you support Medicare for all, or something in between? And let's start with you, Ms. Jacobs.
Yeah, I think healthcare is a human right and that we need to be doing everything we can to get to universal coverage. I don't think any person should die because they can't afford healthcare. And when you look at countries around the world and how they've been able to get to universal coverage, I think it's very clear that a single payer system like Medicare for all is the most efficient way to do that. And so I support Medicare for all. But I also know that when you're looking at healthcare coverage, insurance coverage is only one component of it. We also need to be talking about costs, whether it's paid by the individual at the point of service or by the government. We also need to be talking about the quality of care and about access to care, because for many families, even if they have insurance, they can't access the care that they need. So I support making sure that we are getting drug prices to correlate to their health benefit, putting caps on pharmaceutical prices, and making sure that pharmaceutical companies are spending their money on research and development instead of advertising directly to consumers. You know, we're one of only 2 countries in the world that actually allows pharmaceutical companies to advertise directly to consumers. And I think that's a waste of their money. We need that to be going to R&D. We also need to look at care delivery and how we can modernize care coordination, make sure that people are getting the mental health care that they need. And we need to think about new ways that we can address how we pay for these services. You know, right now we have, for the most part, a fee-for-service model, but there have been a lot of examples, including in Hawaii and Massachusetts, where we move away from that and we bundle payments or we capitate, and that will do a lot to bring down administrative costs. That will do a lot to make sure that we are actually getting people the care that they need. And then we know that prevention is an incredibly important component, and we need to make sure that we are that everyone has access to the primary care that will enable them to have better healthcare outcomes down the road.
Thank you very much. Council President Gómez, where do you stand on the healthcare issue?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. We gotta recognize right now under COVID and even before, but COVID really has exposed the broken system that we have in this country. We have many people that have lost their jobs, which also meant that they lost their health insurance. And their families, their dependents have lost their health insurance. As someone that grew up At one time in my life, I didn't have health insurance, and seeing my mother have to make tough decisions. Should she take me to the emergency room, because that was my, my access to health care. And at times she wouldn't, because of the cost of what that would be for her, and knowing that she was limited with her income. So these are decisions that anybody in this country should be faced ever. We shouldn't have a system that is based on income-based, a system that is leaving people behind because they might not have the ability. So I support universal healthcare. I support medical for all. It's something that we should be moving towards immediately, especially right now, should be one of the topics that should be discussed immediately. But even outside of that, the other piece that we truly need to also discuss is not only the coverage, but also prevention. Prevention is very critical, because a lot of the people, especially in the 53rd, being that it's a district that is an average income district, a district that is also has a lot of community of color, underserved communities. There's a lot of high pollution. There's not ability to have access to healthy food. All of these prevention mechanisms are also very critical to ensure that we're creating a healthy society, not just in terms of access to care, but also prevention. So that's another area that I truly want to lift the importance of it, but also ensure that we're investing on these programs. And also outside of insurance and prevention, we need to ensure that some of these communities have access to hospitals or clinics. Southeast San Diego doesn't have that. So we need to ensure that the infrastructure is also available to the community members.
Thank you very much. Let's go to another question that was submitted in advance. And I believe we start again with Council President Gómez. President Trump has pulled the United States out of the Paris Climate Accords and also from the World Health Organization. He's argued with our allies. He's threatened to pull out of NATO. What should be America's role in the world? Should we be isolationist? Should we be involved?
This is a critical question, because this is the environment that we're living in right now, which, reflects how critical this November election is. And I can't stress the importance of people participating and truly working hard to ensure that we're getting this president out of office. He's put us in dangerous situations, and he really isn't acting based on what we as a nation should be. We are a first country. We should be leading on these issues. We shouldn't be pulling from the Paris Accord. We should be re-signing. We should be leading, literally. We should be setting the example, first of all. We shouldn't be fighting the fact that is there a climate crisis or isn't there? There is. We should be setting strong examples by being the model, and then influencing and supporting other countries to get them to achieve the greenhouse gases that we need to desperately retract the impacts to the climate, and everything else as well. We should be setting the example nationwide. We thrive off of saying that we are a first country, but yet we're not acting like that. Our democracy right now is at stake, not only domestically, but also in other countries.
What should our role in the world be?
Look, I'm a millennial, and September 11th happened when I was in middle school. It happened in Congresswoman Susan Davis's first year in office. And I have never known a day in my adult life that the United States has not been at war. And boy, do I wish there had been members of Congress then who were thinking about the impact of their decisions on my generation, because we know that it's been a huge impact. I believe the United States can play a leadership role in the world, ensuring that Americans are safe and secure, and that we're working to make the world a more peaceful place. In 2021, we're going to have a unique opportunity to rebuild our foreign policy and national security architecture after Donald Trump's complete decimation of it I used to work at the State Department. I think I have one friend who's still there, but otherwise everyone has left because of the horrible morale and conditions that were created by the Trump administration. So we're going to need to rebuild, but we can't just rebuild the way that we had before. We need to look at the kinds of challenges we're going to be facing in the future and what kind of foreign policy architecture we're going to need for that. You know, I think we need to rejoin the Paris Climate Accords and make sure we're taking climate change with the urgency that it deserves. I think that one of the things that COVID-19 has really shown is that we don't have the global governance structures that we need to be able to address these kinds of supranational crises like climate change that are going to come up. We need to rebuild and refund the State Department and USAID and make sure we're not running our foreign policy out of the Pentagon. And we need to refocus our Defense Department to the threats of the future instead of fighting yesterday's wars, including investing more in artificial intelligence, cyber technology, and not building the kinds of planes that we're never, frankly, going to use.
Thank you very much. Let's go to a question from the audience via the Q&A. And this is about an issue that came up during the presidential primary and also an issue before the California legislature. The question is, would either candidate support a wealth tax to address the issue of income inequality? And Ms. Jacobs, if you'll start with that.
Yes, I support a wealth tax. I think we need to, in addition to a wealth tax, raise the highest marginal tax rate, make sure that capital gains are equal to the highest marginal tax rate so that you can close loopholes like the carried interest loophole. Look, I think I should be taxed more. I think my family should be taxed more. I think corporations should be taxed more. And that's part of what I'm going to Congress to do. And a big part of why I started San Diego for Every Child is because I know how much we need to do to make sure that we're addressing childhood poverty for a few reasons. One, it's morally wrong. Two, it's bad for our economy if we have a generation of children who are growing up without the basic needs and without the basis of growth and moving forward. And because it's bad for our competitiveness around the world. If you look at what we really need to do, per our last question, to rebuild our standing in the world, it's to invest domestically, to make sure that we are growing our economy, that we're creating the best generation, the smartest generation, the most educated generation of young people everywhere in the world. And I believe we can do that, including by expanding the earned income tax credit and the child tax credit and expanding the refundability of it. I was really excited to see that in this past Congress, there were a number of actually bipartisan proposals to do that, including one that I really like by Senator Bennett and Senator Romney. We also can't forget seniors. 20% of seniors in California rely on Social Security for 90% of their income. So we have to protect Social Security. And we have to make sure we're making the kinds of investments that are going to grow our economy long term, and not just doing tax cuts that end up depleting our economy, increasing our deficit, and to help middle class families.
Thank you. Council President Gómez, the question of a wealth tax.
Yeah, I strongly support moving forward with the wealth tax, and I'll be proactive in that. As I stated earlier, someone that grew up pretty poor, and seeing my parents worked significantly, multiple jobs, and still struggling at the end of the day. These are issues that our community members are still facing. This country hasn't worked for the working class, hasn't worked for the folks that are way at the bottom, that are in fact are keeping this country moving forward, and they're keeping the folks that are on the top wealthier. We need to correct that. We need to start electing people that are coming from the community, that have an understanding of what it means to grow up poor, what it means to have housing insecurity, what it means to be insured. And because of it, we should be taxing the wealthy much more. In fact, I don't believe that they should be getting any breaks. I believe that we need to close the loopholes on corporations that have utilized those loopholes to benefit themselves. The idea is that they're supposed to be paying their workers more, but that's not the case. We need to increase the minimum wage nationwide. We need to ensure that we are investing that money that will be coming forward on communities that have been utilized to advance the wealth of the wealthy. And I'm a strong believer in that.
Thank you. And if you'll also start with this next question, which is again a national level question. America has long been a beacon for immigrants, but the door seems to be steadily shutting since 2017. What should Congress do regarding the wall, the dreamers, other undocumented immigrants, and the future of immigration?
Yes, that's another personal question that is truly personal to me. You know, growing up, having my parents undocumented, having my brother and my sister, and seeing the pressures that they would go every single day in their lives, and what it meant to me as well, is something that nobody should be going through at all. We need to get the Dream and Promise Act across the finish line to give dreamers a pathway to citizenship. We need to expand student visas, work visas, asylum applications, not restricting them. We need to stop the separations and undo the damage that Trump's anti-immigration policies have inflicted and breaking families apart and putting children behind cages. Those are not the values that we have in this country. We need to repeal the Muslim ban. We need to ensure that we are passing comprehensive immigration reform. Currently, some of the frontline workers are the farmers that, for the most part, tend to be undocumented community members. They need a path to citizenship, and we need to ensure that we are advancing that. I'm very proud to have the support of the chairman of Takano, who's the veteran and working to really represent our immigrant communities, along with Representative Vargas. And then also, because we've seen it right here in our own backyard, how ICE has been treating people, separating children from their parents, from dropping them off at their schools. They're being taken away. This is something that we shouldn't stand for, and it needs to stop. I'm very proud that one of the first things that we did when I got elected was adopt a resolution to have the city of San Diego oppose the border wall. And I'm going to continue speaking loudly for our border communities.
Thank you. Ms. Jacobs, what would you do in Congress on the question of immigration?
Yeah, look, we here in San Diego know that immigrants make our communities better. And just this week, I was talking to some veterans who had been deported because they joined our military as non-citizens. And instead of the oath that they took to the military counting as their oath of citizenship, they ended up getting deported after they served because we were not doing enough to treat their post-traumatic stress. So I think there are a few things that we need to do immediately. One is to pass a Clean Dream Act so that any young person who's here, who came here when they were young, is able to stay, and to pass a law that enables anyone who served our country in the military to get on a pathway to citizenship, to stay here or to come back. Then I think that we need a comprehensive approach to immigration reform. And I think any comprehensive approach needs to include a pathway to citizenship for those who are here undocumented, needs to focus on keeping families together, making sure that businesses have the workers that they need without allowing them to exploit loopholes so that they can pay workers less. And I think a really important part is to resource and fix our immigration courts and visa backlogs, because we know for so many people, the legal immigration system is just not working. Recently, President Trump put out his refugee and asylum seeker goals. It's the lowest number we've ever had in the history of the United States. I think that's absolutely abhorrent. I think we should set a minimum goal of 95,000 refugees a year to come to the United States. It's the right thing to do morally. It's good for our economy. And in talking to young people across our district who are frankly traumatized by the kinds of experiences that they've had, we need to make sure that in any immigration reform package, we put in place funding so that we're giving these kids the social and emotional support that they need to deal with this trauma from the federal government.
Thank you. And the next question starts with you. It's a philosophical one from the Indivisible groups. If elected, will you always support the party leadership? What issues would you prioritize for the district? In what cases would you prioritize for the district or for your own views over leadership?
Yeah, look, I think one of the benefits that I have is that the party establishment is supporting my opponent. I'm not beholden to anybody except constituents in this district. And that means that I will make a decision based on what is best for my district in every single instance. And I don't know anything except voters in this district. So I think there's a lot of places where I disagree with party leadership. A big part of that is that in the initial COVID-19 response bills, I don't believe they put enough assistance for childcare. I'm glad to see that it's in the HEROES Act, but we still need to push to make sure that it's included in any package that is negotiated between the Speaker and Senate Republicans. I also was very disappointed to see that in the CARES Act and now in the HEROES Act, on issues like small business assistance, like extended unemployment, like stimulus checks directly to families, that Democrats agreed to set a political deadline instead of including what's called automatic stabilizers, which basically means that programs continue until our economy reached a certain threshold that we knew families and small businesses were able to make it through without that assistance. I think that we set ourselves up for the situation that we're in right now by not putting those automatic stabilizers in place. And one of the things that I'm really excited about doing is to be a new generation of leaders, to push for these kinds of things, but also to look at new issues like predictive policing models, like data privacy, like artificial intelligence, that from both parties, leaders are not really addressing because frankly, they don't understand the technology. They don't know how to use it. And so I think having more millennials who are social media natives and technology natives is going to be really important because predictive policing needs oversight.
Thank you. Council President Gómez, when would you differ from party leadership?
Yeah, thank you once again, Chris. So, you know, as someone that is proud to be a progressive, comes from the barrio, who got into politics because I saw pretty quickly that our party wasn't reflective and was not responding to the needs of our communities, of our underserved communities. That's why I dedicated my life to truly push in creating a city, a region, a state, a country that is more inclusive, that is truly addressing these racial inequalities that have been plaguing our communities for forever. Yes, I am proud to be endorsed by the California Democratic Party. You know, my opponent wanted that endorsement. She couldn't earn it, but I was very proud that we were able to earn it. I'm not manipulating that Democrats are supporting me. I have the support of the California Democratic Party. But let me be very clear. My loyalty is to ensure that this country is actually, for the very first time, acknowledging and changing the way that we run this country by investing in communities of color, by acknowledging that this community was built on the backs of racism. And that's what I'm going to continue to push. That's my commitment, and I will continue making sure that that is the agenda that I bring forward to ensure that we're bringing the resources that our region needs to address these racial disparities that our communities have been living with, from the climate crisis, housing crisis, income inequality, lack of creating middle income jobs. We need to start changing, and we need to start changing by investing in our communities.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question will start with Ms. Jacobs. And it's a question that's very topical considering the debate that most of us, I believe, watched on Tuesday. What do you think our government should do if President Trump refuses to leave office in January?
I'm sad that we even have to ask this question. At the UN in the Department of Peacekeeping Operations, I worked on electoral issues and what a peacekeeping mission should do when there was an election and the threat of electoral violence in their country. At the State Department, I worked on electoral violence issues all around the world, including especially the election violence that we were expecting to see in Nigeria and in other countries. So, you know, I think that from that experience, I know that if we had heard at the State Department or at the UN the kind of rhetoric coming from the leader that we heard from President Trump at the debate, and frankly, even before the debate, it would raise some serious red flags, and it would really catalyze the international community to start putting in place a plan and a contingency plan. One of the most important components of the American democracy is the peaceful transfer of power, even in really contentious elections. And I'm frankly very disturbed by the kind of rhetoric that we're seeing from this administration. So I think that there are a few things that we need to do, including making sure that Congress is appropriating funding so that this election is as credible as possible and that we're mitigating any kind of foreign influence. Honestly, a lot of this is going to come down to what the generals and the military decide to do, and I am hopeful and I believe that they will make the right choice to be on the side of the American people. And then it's going to be on all of us to take to the streets and to not allow someone to steal an election that they didn't win. We've seen it happen in places like South Korea, in Hong Kong. The people power can overcome all of this, and I'm confident we'll be able to.
Thank you. And Council President Gómez.
Yeah, thank you once again. So I would say that we need to ensure that we're countering the misinformation that Trump is putting forward right now. I think you know, him, the Republican Party, they thrive off of really creating this sense of fear. And this is what currently is occurring. And we need to ensure that if we truly believe in equality and justice for this country, that we push back against that fear that is being created by Donald Trump and the rest of the Republicans. So we need to be very consistent on our strong message that everybody's vote is very critical and it's going to be counted. And we need to ensure that that happens, that our community members are coming out and voting, that we are ensuring that we're putting out folks out there to really monitor the vote, ensure that every vote is counted before anybody declares victory. But more importantly, Chris, I think one of the things that I've seen right now, you know, going back to fear, is very much that. I mean, he's created doubt about the post office. He's creating doubt, folks not really participating, because now he's saying, well, you know, we'll see if I don't get elected, I'm gonna question it, right? So once again, adding to the sense of this urgency of creating this vision on people to stay at home and not participate. I find it very, you know, disgraceful that that's what they're doing, but that's their ammo. That's been their ammo all their existence. So I want to make sure that we're pushing back and that we're creating a new narrative, that we're saying your vote will be counted, you matter, and we can make change, and we will.
Thank you. Let's go to the last question before the closing statements. We'll probably go about 2 minutes over in this debate. This question was from the Q&A. To both candidates, if you lose the election, how will you assist the winner? And we'll start with City Council President Gómez.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Well, you know, I'm running to continue doing the work that I've been doing my entire life, which is create a a society that is more inclusive and reflective of who we are. You know, representation does matter, and I'm running actually to make national history by electing the first queer Latina in the nation to be voted in Congress. But more importantly, one that has that comes from the barrio. That's really important. Life experience is also critical, but also professional experience. As council president, I've proven that I can get things done, addressing the issues that our community are currently living with. So I'm going to continue fighting for inclusion. I'm going to continue fighting for making sure that our communities are heard anywhere, whether getting elected, whether having to push as an advocate, as an organizer. That's not changing. My commitment in making sure that this country works for all of us and not just the wealthy, which continues to exist, is not enough and is no longer acceptable. And that's my commitment.
Thank you. And Ms. Jacobs, how will you work with the winner if you're not elected?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked this question, Chris, because it's something I feel strongly about, and I feel like I've proven what I will do, which is that when I lost my last election, the very next day I got up and I made sure that the Democrat who won got the support he needed to beat the Republican and to flip that seat, and to work with down ballot candidates across San Diego County to make sure that they were able to win their races and to get the support that they needed. I believe that campaigns are not just about the candidate. They're about how we run and how we make sure that we are inspiring the next generation of leaders after us, which is why I feel very strongly that our campaign has a paid internship program so that any young person who wants experience in politics is able to get it. I always choose my jobs and what I'm going to do based on where I feel like I can have the most impact and where I can be of the most service. And that's really how I make every decision and how I decided to run for Congress, and why I started San Diego for Every Child, because I saw a need in our community and I knew that it needed a new initiative to be able to address it, and that it's my responsibility to do everything I can to serve our community and to make San Diego and the world better. And I will continue that work regardless of what happens in this election. And, you know, I think it's really important to say that the kind of work that we're doing, building these coalitions, bringing attention to these kinds of issues, that's not work that stops whether or not I get elected. It's going to be important because in the apocryphal FDR words, like, okay, you got me elected, now make me do it. We're going to need inside, outside strategy. We're going to need everyone involved to build the future that we all deserve.
Thank you very much. And now we'll go to the closing statements. We began the opening statements with City Council President Gómez, so it'll be Sara Jacobs' turn to begin the closing statement. So 2-minute closing statement.
Well, thank you all again so much for taking the time to talk with both of us. My background is in policy, so I've really enjoyed the opportunity to take this deep dive on so many of the issues we'll be working on in Congress. And I really do believe that the 117th Congress will be almost entirely focused on economic recovery from COVID. And my focus will be on making sure that that assistance gets to those who need it most, and that our existing priorities are addressed in our stimulus spending. San Diego is going to need more than just a member of Congress who spends 2 years getting their sea legs. What I can promise is that I've thought deeply about both the domestic and international issues that will be facing Congress. I'm a proud product of San Diego Public Schools and was proud to be able to serve my country at the State Department during the Obama administration, at UNICEF, and to be serving my community now as the founder and chair of San Diego for Every Child. I'm so grateful for everything that San Diego has done for me and my family, and I believe that it's my responsibility to help build a fairer and more equitable world and San Diego. I have a track record of building coalitions of unlikely partners to solve problems. And I just want to say on a personal note, I know that this year has been a lot to handle, that we're still grappling with COVID, with the economic crisis, and now the battle over the Supreme Court, and things feel really difficult and dark right now. But I have seen firsthand what's possible when San Diegans have a big idea and work together to get it done. And I know that together, we're going to elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. We're going to elect a new generation of leaders. We're going to get rid of this divisive, toxic politics, and we're going to build the future that we all deserve. So thank you again so much for having me. Thank you, Chris, for moderating. Thank you, Indivisible, for hosting and for all the work that you do. And I'd be very honored to earn your support.
Thank you. And now City Council President Gómez.
Yes, thank you. Thank you again for having me and for giving me an opportunity to discuss these issues today, very critical. America is being challenged in 2020 by a global pandemic induced by climate change, a shattering recession, a reckoning on race and justice. We've learned once again that elections have consequences, and having elected leaders with a proven record of leadership and getting things done can make the difference between someone's life or death. As president of the San Diego City Council, I work to expand affordable housing. I strengthen protections for low-income renters, and I led the implementation of the city's climate action plan. And I have delivered millions in new funding for communities' priorities. I fought discrimination, establishing the Office of Race and Equity, cracking down on housing discrimination, banning dangerous chokeholds by police, and leading the efforts on an independent commission on police practices with the power to launch misconduct investigations and subpoena witnesses. I have delivered results, and I will bring this type of effective leadership to Congress. That's why I'm the only candidate to have been endorsed by Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, California Democratic Party, and essential workers on the front line of this pandemic. I have taken on Trump's dangerous policies and special interests who prioritize big corporations over the needs of San Diego families. And I have taken big polluters who had threatened the climate and the health of our community. And I have taken fast actions to provide relief for San Diegan families. This is the leadership that I will bring to you. I look forward in earning your support. So thank you so much for today.
Thank you very much. I want to thank both candidates, Georgette Gómez and Sara Jacobs, for this very informative and, compared to Tuesday, certainly a very civil debate, the kind of debate that we really need in a democracy. I want to thank the audience. We'll find out later the final tally, but it's at least over 150, I believe, at this point. And most importantly, I want to ask everyone who's listening, don't forget to safely vote on, or better yet, November 3rd. That's the most important thing you can do in our democracy. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Indivisible, for sponsoring this, and go vote.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much, everyone. I put some links in the chat. We've published our voter guide today. There's a lot of other actions and things coming up. We really appreciate all our candidates. We appreciate Chris, our moderator. Please feel free to join us again. Thank you.